I always believed I had a pretty good relationship with my stepson, Ryan. He was quiet, respectful, and kept mostly to himself, but I never thought much of it. Teenagers need space, right? He'd come home from school, eat dinner with us, mumble a few words here and there, then head straight to his room. I figured that was normal. I didn't want to be the overbearing step-parent, so I gave him room to breathe. But lately, something felt off. It wasn't just the silence. It was heavier than that. His eyes looked distant. His energy had changed. And yet, whenever I asked how he was doing, he'd give the same reply. "I'm fine." I didn't want to push him, but that uneasy feeling kept growing. It started with little things: his door always locked, lights on late into the night, and strange items disappearing from around the house. At first I brushed it off. Maybe he was going through a phase, or maybe school stress. But one evening, I passed by his room and noticed the door slightly ajar. He didn't see me. What I saw inside left me frozen. It wasn't anything dangerous or loud, but it was strange, secretive. It didn't match the quiet, distant boy I thought I knew. That's when I realized I didn't know him as well as I thought, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I knew I had to step in, not to accuse him, but to understand. What was he hiding? Why had he changed? And most importantly, was he okay? What I discovered over the next few days unraveled everything I believed about him. It wasn't just one secret. It was layers of them. And the truth was far more complicated than I ever imagined. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I couldn't get the image out of my mind. Ryan sitting on the floor, surrounded by scattered papers, his laptop open with a dozen tabs, and something clutched tightly in his hand. He looked focused, almost obsessed, like he was trying to solve something. I didn't want to barge in, so I quietly stepped away, but that moment stuck with me. From that night on, I started paying closer attention. Over the next few days, I noticed more signs. He barely spoke at dinner, his appetite almost gone. I saw him sneaking into the attic once with a flashlight, and later, coming back down with dusty boxes. When I asked him casually what he was doing, he just shrugged and said he was cleaning up some old stuff. But the unease in his voice told me otherwise. He wasn't lying exactly, but he wasn't being honest either. I started thinking back to the past year. After Ryan's dad, my husband, passed away, things changed for all of us. Ryan had always been quiet, but he became more withdrawn. I tried to give him time, thinking grief needed space, but maybe in giving him that space, I missed something important. One afternoon, when he was at school, I found myself standing outside his room again. The door was closed, but unlocked. I hesitated. Part of me felt like I was crossing a line, but I was worried, really worried. I stepped inside. It looked like a normal teenager's room at first, until I noticed the wall near his desk. Dozens of printed out emails, maps, and what looked like old newspaper clippings were pinned up, connected by pieces of thread and handwritten notes. At the center was a faded photograph of a man I didn't recognize. I felt a wave of confusion. What was this? Was he researching something? Investigating? The clippings weren't random either. They were all about missing people from different years, different towns, different cases. But one detail was consistent in each one. The same man appeared in every article. I stepped back, heart pounding. What had Ryan gotten himself into? Was he just curious? Or was there more to it? And then I saw the newest article. One that hadn't been pinned yet. It was from our town, dated just last week. My hands trembled as I held the newspaper clipping from our town. It mentioned a man who had been seen near a school acting strangely. Police had questioned him but released him due to lack of evidence. Nothing too alarming on the surface, until I looked closer and saw the grainy photo beside the article. It was the same man from all the other clippings on Ryan's wall. The same face, same dark coat, same piercing stare. How had Ryan found all this? Why was he so invested? I waited for him to come home that evening, unsure of how to even begin the conversation. When he walked through the door, he looked tired, distracted. I wanted to ask him right away, but I couldn't. Not like that. Instead, I decided to keep watching, try to understand more before confronting him. Something told me this wasn't just a random obsession. This meant something personal to him. That night, I stayed up and listened. Around midnight, I heard Ryan sneak out of his room. I followed him, quietly, down the hallway. He went straight to the attic again. I stood by the bottom of the stairs, debating whether to go up. Just as I placed my foot on the first step, I heard him talking, but not to me, not to anyone I could see. A low voice, like he was trying to stay calm. I couldn't hear much, but one sentence caught me completely off guard. "You don't scare me anymore." I froze. Was he imagining things? Was someone else up there? The attic door creaked a little, and I backed away just in time before he came back down. The next day, I visited his school, hoping to quietly talk to one of his teachers. Maybe they'd notice changes in his behavior, too. His English teacher, Ms. Harper, looked surprised when I asked. "He's been working on an independent research project," she said. "Very intense, actually. Historical disappearances. Something to do with local records. I thought you knew." No, I didn't know. I started to wonder, was this man in the photo just part of some old, unsolved case? Or was Ryan trying to warn me about something bigger, something real? All I knew was that whatever Ryan was hiding, he believed in it deeply, and he was getting closer to something. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept circling back to the attic, the photo wall, and Ryan's quiet words, "You don't scare me anymore." It was becoming clear that whatever he was chasing, it wasn't just a school project or a harmless curiosity. There was a weight to it, a purpose. And I couldn't shake the feeling that he was in deeper than I realized. I sat on the couch in the dark, going through the notes I'd carefully taken from his wall earlier. The articles, the photos, the patterns. They all pointed towards something, but I couldn't piece it together fast enough. By morning, Ryan was already gone. No note, no message. I tried to call him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panic crept in. I told myself maybe he just left early for school or to do more research, but something didn't sit right. I ended up driving to the school myself, heart pounding the whole way, but when I asked the front desk, they said he hadn't checked in. I stood there frozen, unsure what to do next. I went back home trying to retrace everything he'd done over the last week. I remembered the boxes from the attic. Maybe there was more he hadn't shown me. I climbed up slowly, flashlight in hand, and opened the box I hadn't touched before. Inside were journals, old, worn out, and filled with handwriting I didn't recognize. One page had Ryan's name written at the top, but the rest looked like it had been written by someone else. The dates were decades old. I flipped through them and realized they weren't just journals. They were records, witness accounts, details of disappearances, descriptions of the same man, the one in Ryan's clippings. Then I found a map. Ryan had circled a location just outside of town, an abandoned railway tunnel. My heart sank. It matched one of the places mentioned in the articles. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys and drove straight there, praying I wasn't too late. The area was silent, overgrown with weeds and trees. I parked near the entrance, heart racing, and stepped out. The tunnel loomed ahead like a black hole. No sign of Ryan. I shouted his name, but only echoes came back. I walked slowly, cautiously, deeper into the dark. About 30 feet in, I saw faint light, his flashlight. It was lying on the ground, still on. Beside it, scratched into the wall, were strange markings. Symbols. I didn't understand them, but they looked ancient, like they'd been there for years. My pulse pounded in my ears. I called his name again. Nothing. Just the cold air and that gnawing silence. Then, from further down the tunnel, I heard something. Not a voice, not footsteps, just movement. Slow, deliberate, and too heavy to be Ryan. I stood frozen, unsure whether to run or go deeper. But I knew one thing for sure. Ryan was close, and whatever he was chasing, it had already found him. I stood there, rooted in place, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I couldn't. Ryan was somewhere in that tunnel, and no matter how scared I wasn't going to leave him. I gripped the flashlight tighter and forced myself to take a step forward, then another. The sound, whatever it was, grew fainter, like it was moving deeper underground. I called out again, louder this time, but the only response was the eerie drip of water echoing off the walls. About 50 feet in, the narrow tunnel widened into an old maintenance chamber. Dust swirled in the beam of my flashlight. On the far wall, more of those strange symbols were etched into the bricks, and in the center of the room, something unexpected: Ryan's notebook. It was open, pages fluttering slightly from a breeze I couldn't explain. I picked it up and scanned the most recent entries. His handwriting was messy, rushed. One line stood out. He was real. I saw him. He knows I'm watching. I stared at the words, a cold chill running down my spine. Who was he talking about? The man in the photos? Was this just some elaborate fantasy Ryan had built up in his mind, or was there really someone following him? I couldn't tell anymore. Just then, I heard footsteps. Real ones. Behind me. I turned quickly, flashlight trembling in my hand. A figure stood at the entrance of the chamber. My heart nearly stopped, until I realized it was Ryan. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a hushed voice. "It's not safe." Before I could speak, he pulled me into the shadows of the chamber and pointed to the side wall. There, almost hidden, was a small metal door. "He's been using this place," Ryan whispered. "He's still around. I found more than I was supposed to." I didn't understand. "Who is he, Ryan? Why are you doing all this?" He hesitated. "He's not just some random man. He's connected to Dad." I blinked. "What?" Ryan pulled out an old photo from his pocket. It was worn, edges frayed, but clear enough to recognize the man and my late husband standing beside him. I felt the ground shift under me. Ryan kept talking, voice shaking now. "I think Dad knew him, maybe even worked with him. I don't think Dad's death was an accident. I think he found something out, and they silenced him." My legs nearly gave out. The grief I thought I'd processed came crashing back with fresh confusion and horror. The metal door creaked, breaking the silence. Ryan and I both turned. It hadn't been touched. But now, it was open, and something was moving behind it. The metal door creaked wider, slow and deliberate, revealing a narrow staircase that led even deeper underground. A damp, musty scent wafted out, thick with the kind of silence that feels alive. Ryan gripped my hand tightly, and though my instincts screamed for us to run, we moved forward together. We had come too far to turn back now. Each step felt like a drop into something darker than either of us had imagined. At the bottom of the stairs, we found what looked like a small underground office, lit dimly by a single flickering bulb. On the desk were more newspaper clippings, notes, and photos. My husband's handwriting was everywhere. His old notebooks, files with his name on them. Ryan was right. He'd been investigating the same man, but what shocked me more was a police badge buried beneath the papers. My husband hadn't just known the man. He had once worked with him. Then we heard the sound, a cough, a shuffle. From the shadows behind the shelves stepped the man from the photo, older now, gaunt, but unmistakably him. My heart slammed in my chest. He raised his hand slowly, as if surrendering. "You've found what you were never supposed to," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. Ryan stepped forward. "Why was my dad working with you? Why did he die?" The man didn't answer at first. Then he looked at me, eyes heavy with something between guilt and fatigue. "Your father uncovered something about missing children cases being buried by someone higher up. He tried to expose it. I warned him to stay quiet." He paused. He didn't listen. I wanted to scream, cry, do something, but I couldn't. Everything spun in silence. Then came the twist neither of us expected. The man stepped aside, revealing a dusty file cabinet. "Your father left something here for you," he said to Ryan. "He knew you'd come one day." Ryan opened the drawer, pulling out a sealed envelope with his name in Dad's handwriting. But before he could open it, sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed through the cracks of the tunnel entrance. Someone had followed us. The man turned toward the sound, his face suddenly tense. "They found me," he whispered, "and now they've found you too." In that moment, everything felt frozen. The sound of the sirens was getting louder, bouncing off the tunnel walls, filling the air with urgency. Ryan clutched the envelope tighter, like it held all the answers he'd been chasing. I looked at the man, this stranger who had been a shadow over our lives for so long. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were tired, resigned. He didn't run. He just stepped back into the shadows and disappeared into a hidden passage behind the cabinet, leaving us with more questions than answers. We barely had time to process what happened before the police arrived. Flashlights flooded the room. I explained what we found, that my stepson had uncovered an old case linked to his father. Ryan handed over the envelope, unopened, and for a moment I thought he might let it go. But after everything, he needed to see it for himself. Later that night, after the police left and things finally calmed, Ryan sat quietly at the kitchen table. I made us tea, though neither of us touched it. He opened the envelope with careful hands. Inside was a letter, written by his father before he died. It confirmed everything: the investigations, the threats, the risks he took trying to protect others. He hadn't died in an accident. He was silenced. But he had hoped that someday, if Ryan found his way to the truth, he'd know that his father had never stopped fighting for what was right. Ryan cried quietly as he read, and I sat beside him, holding his hand, letting him feel every word. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Something had shifted. The mystery was no longer just about fear or danger. It was about legacy, about truth. Weeks passed, and life began to settle again. Ryan started writing, documenting everything, determined to tell his father's story, not just for closure, but to make sure others never had to wonder like we did. He wanted the truth to live on, not buried in tunnels or hidden in old files. Sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with finally knowing the right questions were asked.